The shortages at the petrol pumps continue and the government is still considering whether to use the army. Long queues equal frustration for drivers and essential workers struggling to do their jobs.
I went to Asda, no petrol. I went to Esso, no petrol, no diesel.
I've been sat here for an hour and a half.
Yeah, I suppose we're at work at 12 o'clock. It's ridiculous.
I'm just desperate to get into the petrol station.
The shortages are not happening everywhere in the UK and the government is urging people just to buy petrol when they need it. Also tonight, Labour's big green pledge, £28 billion a year for green industries. What future for the girls of Afghanistan having adjusted to life under the Taliban?
A lot of women have become educated. What if they don't want to live in that way?
تر هر کور تر هر ځای پرېسېدلی دي هغه هر د هر شا پلار لري ورور لري قریب لري هغه قریبان د خپل حل.
And the new satellite about to be sent into space in the longest continuous record of the changing state of our planet.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, what next for Team Europe as they hope to bounce back after a miserable weekend and their record defeat to USA in the Ryder Cup.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. This morning the government said it had no plans to bring in the army to ease the queues at the petrol pumps. Tonight the BBC understands the government is still seriously considering whether to use the army to drive tankers. While there are calls for essential workers to be given priority to buy fuel, some areas of the UK are experiencing no shortages. And according to the haulage industry, there are at least as many petrol tankers on the road now as there were before this current crisis began. Our business editor Simon Jack has the latest.
Monday morning rush hour was more stressful than normal after a weekend when panic buying by some caused problems for all. Frustration in London.
I've been here ages, mate.
We are waiting 2 hours here and people just go around and straight here.
Skipping the queue.
There were queues and some closures in Birmingham, commuter anger in Teesside.
Yeah, I suppose we're at work at 12 o'clock. It's ridiculous.
How much petrol have you got?
I'm literally on empty.
But fewer problems were reported in Scotland and Northern Ireland, particularly in rural areas. For the taxi industry, this isn't panic buying, it's essential purchases that need priority support.
If we don't get priority, there will be serious problems for the sector. There will be serious problems for the NHS, for the travelling public, because we move around blood, prescriptions, food, and take people to all manner of different venues and destinations.
The company that delivers fuel to a quarter of all UK petrol stations said things would return to normal if motorists behave normally.
We've been working flat out throughout the weekend and again today, and deliveries are getting through nationwide. That's a really important thing to say. But importantly as well is that as long as people are buying or storing fuel they don't need, it will be difficult for all suppliers to replenish stocks to normal levels.
Unlike things like food or loo roll, the amount of fuel you can stockpile is generally limited by the size of your fuel tank. Once that's full, the panic is over for a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. Now the government and industry are hoping, expecting that means that this spike in demand will ease in the coming days. One reason perhaps the government today downplayed the need for the army to start getting behind the wheels of fuel tankers.
Like the fuel crisis in the year 2000, the army is standing by. But for now, just to help with training and testing new lorry drivers.
We are bringing MOD trainers in to accelerate some of the HGV training. To clear a backlog of people who want to carry out those tests. So there's definitely a role there for the MOD, and we're doing that. In terms of other things, we've no plans at the moment to bring in the army to actually do driving, but we always have a civil contingencies section within the army that's always on standby should they be needed.
There are the same number of fuel trucks on the road this week as last. What this crisis shows is that the serious and persistent shortage of HGV drivers can leave any supply chain extremely vulnerable to a sharp rise in demand. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Well, the government's brought in a number of emergency measures to try to ease the queues at petrol stations, including a temporary visa scheme for foreign drivers. But how much difference will they make? Here's our transport correspondent, Caroline Davis.
Resolving the HGV driver crisis takes some careful but quick manoeuvring. So when does the visa system start? The scheme will be opening at the beginning of October and the visas will expire on the 24th of December. Industry groups say they're still waiting for clarity on how exactly the visa process will work and, crucially, how long it will take. So, will foreign drivers return? There's a driver shortage across the EU. According to the most recent data from the last 2 years, Poland has a gap of 124,000, Germany up to 60,000 and France 43,000, although these figures may well have changed. It means there's competition for drivers.
There should be an extremely good package in terms of salaries and working conditions behind it. There is a shortage of drivers everywhere, so why should they go to the UK instead of another country?
And some, like Dutch driver Karel, are sceptical too.
The time for 3 months is too short for us truck drivers to go to England. Yeah, I have a contract with my company and I work there 30 years, yes, and then I'm not going to England for 3 months.
What's the effect on other industries?
Petrol isn't the only industry affected by this, from chicken and milkshake shortages to other industries too, saying that they are struggling to find drivers. The government will hope that changes to the testing system, additional training, these visas and other measures that it's introducing will help solve the problem. But some think that this isn't over yet.
It's not a quick fix. What we need to do is deliver quick solutions to get over the worst of the disruption right now. And the quickest way of doing that is getting people who've already got an HGV driving licence to be in this country driving a truck. There will still be driver shortages, but there should be a resolution to the worst of the issues, we would say early next year.
The question will be whether these changes can make a difference before the Christmas rush. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Let's talk to our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, who's at Westminster for us. So, Vicky, the shortages are continuing in some areas of the UK, not everywhere, it must be said. And where are we now with whether the government is considering using the army or isn't considering using the army?
Well, two things today, really. One has been this message of reassurance. We've been hearing that from ministers, but today it came from the industry itself. And I think they're hoping that that will have an impact on everyone's behaviour by saying that the fact that, of course, lots of tanks are now full of petrol should mean that that spike in demand starts to drop. So they're hoping over the coming days that that will happen. But ministers do want to be ready in case it doesn't. So after some toing and froing about the use of the army, it's never been ruled out, but we were told that actually there were no current plans to bring them in. What they want is for the army to be ready in case they're needed. And what I'm being told is it's not as easy as it sounds getting the army to come in and drive petrol tanks. They need to be trained. Lots of things need to be put in place, and I think that is likely to be the next step. The government also coming under pressure from the opposition parties to make sure that critical workers get the petrol and the fuel that they need. So can they do more to make sure that they get priority? There's no plans for that at the moment, but of course those parties really saying about the government that this is about their incompetence.
Vicky at Westminster, thank you. Labour has pledged to spend £28 billion a year on what it calls the green industries of the future. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, told the party conference in Brighton that the money would be spent on projects like electric vehicle batteries and wind technology. She also pledged to phase out business rates and to force giant tech firms to pay more tax. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, reports.
Turbulence. Labour's been battered in recent years. To return to power, it must recover its reputation. And most of all, perhaps, to demonstrate it can hold securely onto taxpayers' cash. No surprise, a nervous moment, because it's Rachel Reeves' job to prove that. It was her first speech as Shadow Chancellor, her ambition to be the first of a kind.
I can announce today Labour's climate investment pledge. An additional £28 billion of capital investment in our country's green transition for each and every year of this decade. I will be a responsible Chancellor. I will be Britain's first Green Chancellor.
Whether it's solar panels, insulation, or much bigger projects, for this BRIGHTON organisation that helps families go green, the potential cash could prompt so much more.
If we match it with private investment, we could even do more. So what we need to do is just level up the cost of renewable energy.
The wannabe Chancellor also promised to scrap business rates, to tax online firms more, but also to control the purse strings. Not an easy message for a Labour conference to hear.
That will involve difficult choices for me and for my colleagues.
Her belief without discipline on spending and a vow to get the debt down, credibility will stay out of reach.
Labour will tax fairly, spend wisely, hard work met with fair rewards, working together to meet the challenges of the future. Now that is what a Labour government will do. Thank you, conference.
What neither of them want to mention is hiking income tax or the party's former promises to nationalise big utilities.
Are you having enough of an impact?
What if Keir Starmer just won't listen to those who want to stick with those old vows?
I'm totally confused. I'm totally confused. And I actually think these are all popular. I want clarity from them. If they're not, I think they're missing a trick.
But the leaders in charge now believe they just have to shed Labour's image of making expensive promises and being too attached to spending your money, even if that upsets people here this week, to get that wider message out there.
Oh, this is really nice.
They don't want to be opposition politicians popping into your high street, but the duo you'd choose to move into Downing Street. But they know it's far to go.
I think this is a real change. I think business was somewhat despondent about the Labour Party in recent years. I think they'll feel on balance this week that things are moving in a much better direction.
An early embrace from the top team's backers, Rachel Reeves' MP's sister. But there's a lot of detail yet to come and an awful lot of convincing to do.
And Fiona, it's got pretty stormy here in Brighton in the last half hour, and I'm not just talking about the wind at the seaside, because one of Keir Starmer's top team, his shadow cabinet, has quit in a pretty dramatic fashion, citing real frustration with Keir Starmer and an argument they had about whether or not Labour should back raising the minimum wage. Andy MacDonald is somebody who was always seen as being very close to Jeremy Corbyn, so he wasn't necessarily a natural political pal of Keir Starmer in any case. But quitting during conference, during a vital moment for the party, is a really good example of the tension that's still there between Keir Starmer and many people on the left of the party.
Lauren, a very windy Brighton, thank you. The government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were nearly 38,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That means in the past week there was an average of 34,500 new cases per day. Another 40 deaths have been recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test, taking the average number per day in the last week to 137. On vaccinations, Wales did not release its latest vaccination data today, but for the rest of the UK, now over 89.5% of people aged 16 or over have had their first jab, while nearly 82.5% are now double vaccinated. Following the general election over the weekend, Germany's Social Democratic Party says it has a mandate to form a government. With 26% of the vote, Olaf Scholz aims to create a coalition with the Greens and Liberals before Christmas. But even that deadline might be overly optimistic, as Mrs Merkel's Christian Democrat Party, now led by her successor, is determined to fight on to try to form its own coalition. Our Europe editor, Katja Adler, reports from Berlin.
If you find yourself wondering what just happened in Germany after yesterday's election, you're not alone. German voters have followed hourly news updates today, trying to get a sense of where their country's headed. These two rivals, one Conservative, one Social Democrat, each say they want to form Germany's next government. With the vote so splintered here, who will be the first to form a stable coalition?
We have seen that the public have given us a mandate to make a serious go at driving this forward.
No party can derive a clear mandate to govern from this result, but we are convinced a government led by CDU-CSU is best for our country, and we will feel obliged to our voters.
Coalition building will be tricky. There are competing priorities between the political parties now in negotiations, including smaller parties like Germany's Greens and the business-minded FDP.
It is ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.
We still don't know who will lead our country in the next years. And personally, I feel like the CDU should realize that we voted against them, that a lot of people at least voted against them.
All this political uncertainty might be unsettling for Germany's allies and trade partners abroad who are used to relying on German stability and predictability. But this is not about Germany imploding. The fact that Angela Merkel was Chancellor here for 16 long years was down to her. She was like a stopper in a bottle. Now she's going, a lot of those votes simply went elsewhere. This is a country used to coalition building, and in the meantime, Chancellor Merkel remains firmly in place. You do sense palpable frustration amongst many young Germans with the election aftermath. Luisa Neubauer is known here as Germany's Greta Thunberg.
They all talk about party politics while there's a climate catastrophe going on and someone needs to stop it. Politics created this generational conflict this year because people had to decide between their own interests and the interest of their child.
Angela Merkel was determined to keep her thoughts to herself today. Her retirement plans are now on ice. Coalition haggling here is predicted to last till Christmas at least. Katja Adler, BBC News, Berlin.
Time has just gone 6:15. Our top story this evening. The shortages at the petrol pumps continue, and the BBC understands the government is still considering whether to bring in the army. And a call for tighter rules on the use of e-scooters amid concerns about the safety of riders and pedestrians.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, Moeen Ali calls time on his international Test cricket career. The England all-rounder says he blames the intensity, but still continues in the shorter forms of the game.
It's 6 weeks since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan and ousted Western troops. Their heartland is in the south of the country, Helmand province. British troops were deployed there and saw some of the fiercest fighting throughout the 20-year war. Most people in the south are Pashtuns, one of Afghanistan's main ethnic groups and increasingly dominant since the Taliban victory. Our correspondent Jeremy Bowen has travelled from Kandahar to Lashkargah, the capital of Helmand, through areas devastated by the war, where once again the Taliban are putting their stamp on what they've named the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan.
No one's future is secure in this country, especially girls. At Lashkargah Girls High and across Afghanistan, only the under-12s have been allowed back. The Taliban says older girls will return too. Many don't believe them, including people in this town who didn't want to be filmed. Taliban rules on girls are seen as a big test by foreign countries who could help Afghanistan. This school was rated one of the best in the country by the British Council. The Taliban says education will now follow Islamic Sharia law. All the boys are back at their desks. The head says, be patient. The older girls will come back.
داسې کسان دي چې د ماښام ډوډۍ نه لري جامع جهاني دوی په رسمیت کې نه پیژني چې دا ښځو ته حق نه ورکوي داسې نه کوي نو خو دوی په تدریجي ټول کارونه سموي اول خو دومره وشي چې دا خلک چې هغه اقتصادي مشکلات لري د دوی هغه مشکلات خو حل سي موږ په افغانستان باور لرو چې دوی خپل په پښو درېږي.
Do you think girls' education is safe under the Taliban?
بله و بله سل په سله کې زه باور لرم.
Helmand is in the Taliban heartland. It offers clues about the way they want Afghanistan to go. They're still euphoric about victory. The last time the Taliban seized the country, they used ruthless violence to impose their religious and cultural beliefs. They're not putting down their guns. But this time, the leaders are arguing about power and the best way to keep it. The governor of Helmand, Abdul Ahad Talib, said older girls would go back to school when more religion was in the curriculum. Islamic law was their guide.
In the last 20 years, a lot of women have become educated. What if they don't want to live in that way?
Islam دغدي هغه تر هر کور تر هر ځای پر رسیدلې دي هغه هر د ارشا پلار لري ورو لري قریب لري هغه قریبان د خپل حالت دا کنټرولي.
You fought against the British when they were here. What do you think about what they did?
په شل کال کې دوی خپل ناکامي ولیدله دغه دی او زموږ د افغانستان خرابې هم ولیدله چې زموږ افغانستان یې در بدره کوي خراب یې کوي او دوی هم د شل کال چې ارڅ کم پوج جوړ کړی و اجر پوج دغه پوج او پای هم ولیدله او خپل دغه د شکست هم دغه کوي خپل د شتمنۍ شکست هم ولیدي اوس زموږ ټول خارجان ته او برتانوي عسکرو ته
The West would be welcomed back if they came in peace to help the people. He said, "You've made them suffer enough."
The Americans, the British and their allies came into Afghanistan in 2001 with a clear enough mission: to destroy Al-Qaeda and to punish the Taliban for harboring them. It's what happened next that's harder to understand and to justify. A war that couldn't be won, that cut across all the hopes they said they had to make Afghanistan into a better place.
The troops in Afghanistan were told they were fighting to make their families safer at home and to help Afghans build a nation that would never again be a haven for groups like Al-Qaeda. One of the biggest battles was in Helmand in 2010, in the cotton and opium fields around Marja. Cultures collided. You can see their fear as British troops took over their home. The plan, quick victory, turned into grinding guerrilla warfare. After 3 months, the US commander called Marja a bleeding ulcer. This is Marja now. The war ebbed and flowed across it until the end. Now it's over, Shamsullah went back to the war-damaged home he's too poor to repair. His brother, Zia al-Haq, who planted the tree, was killed fighting for the Taliban. Marja is enveloped by past loss, future pain, and for Shamsullah's mother, Goljuma, anger and grief. 2 more of her sons were arrested, forced into the Afghan army and died fighting. A 4th was killed in an airstrike.
They said they were here to make a better Afghanistan for women as well. Why did your son join the Taliban? In Lashkar Gah, you can see the forces that are shaping Afghanistan. The power of religion and tradition in the Pashtun tribes who dominate the south. The humanitarian crisis that might force concessions to women to get Western help. Young Talibs have smartphones. Their fathers banned photography. Like the world, Afghanistan has changed. It's harder now to bend and break a country. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Helmand.
The court has been told that the MP Claudia Webb threatened to send naked images of a woman to her family because she was jealous of the woman's friendship with her partner. Ms Webb, who's an independent MP for Leicester East after being suspended by the Labour Party, also threatened Michelle Merritt with acid. Ms Webb denies a charge of harassment. Police have arrested 53 people at a climate change demonstration held by the campaign group Insulate Britain. The protesters defied a court order and blocked a slip road on the M25 motorway at Heathrow Airport. It's the latest of several protests targeting major roads in the southeast. A High Court injunction banning protests around the M25 and Dartford crossing was issued last Thursday. Freak winds described as a mini tornado have damaged houses and overturned vehicles near Cleethorpes and Hull. Residents said they were hit by the strong winds this morning and described walls and fences being blown away and bins flying through the air. Shantay Hussain was just 19 when she was seriously injured in a crash on an e-scooter. Her 20-year-old boyfriend was killed. Still struggling with the aftermath of the accident, she's calling for helmets to be made compulsory for riders. E-scooters are being officially trialled in more than 30 areas in England, but in recent months they've been involved in several deaths. Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly reports.
Shaq Pinnock, 20 years old. He met his girlfriend, Shantay Hussain, in his hometown of Wolverhampton. He bought an e-scooter over the internet, and the couple were on it together when it was in collision with a car. Both suffered appalling injuries. Shaq fractured his skull and had a bleed on the brain. Hospital staff put their beds together so that Shantay could be with her boyfriend for the last time. Then the machines were turned off and Shaq's life ended. In their first interview since the tragedy, Shantay and her mum Amanda say there needs to be more controls on e-scooters.
When the police first knocked on my door, I was actually convinced that she'd gone, the way they were talking.
At 19, Shantay has scars all over her body and lifelong injuries.
My knee just smashed into pieces. I've got 2 metal plates in my leg. I've got one here. The plates are screwed into place and this is literally holding my knee together. I fractured my elbow. I lost my 2 front teeth as well.
So many e-scooters are being ridden illegally. They're banned on motorways. The only ones that should be on the roads are those which are hired as part of the official trials happening around the country. And even with these, pavement riding is banned. And it's illegal for 2 people to be on the same scooter. Shaq Pinnock is one of a number of recent e-scooter fatalities. His mum Celine has been calling for helmets to be made compulsory for all e-scooter riders. At the moment, you're just advised to wear one.
People are now seeing that we need to wear a helmet. Don't let yourself be a shackle because it's not easy, because he cannot be replaced. And do not let his passing be in vain.
And Shantay has joined the campaign.
The helmet could have saved his life. The injuries on his head, they were the worst.
And how are you now?
Shaq passing is really starting to hit me now because I think about him all the time, and the fact he's not here now, it's just hard.
June Kelly, BBC News.
For almost 50 years, a satellite has been orbiting our planet, providing a unique record of the evolving state of the Earth, the changes to our forests, glaciers, deserts, oceans. The latest satellite, called Landsat 9, will go into orbit in half an hour's time. NASA claims this newest addition to the longest continuous record of the Earth's surface will enable scientists to separate human and natural causes of environmental changes. Here's our science editor, David Shookman.
Every time we see the Earth from space, its sheer beauty takes the breath away. And it's easy to forget how we've only had views like this in the last few decades.
There's the Earth coming up. Wow, that's pretty.
Sight of our planet as a delicate blue oasis was first revealed by American astronauts circling the moon, and they found the experience really moving. In fact, the images were so powerful they helped to kickstart the environmental movement. And since then, satellites have spotted forests being cleared in Madagascar, huge mines in Germany gouging out coal, cities sprawling into deserts, and the effect of all this making the climate more hostile. Being able to see our home from space has transformed our awareness of how fragile it is. It's revealed how human activity is causing damage in ways you just can't pick up from the ground. But the good news is it creates chances to get things right in future, like spotting this toxic algal bloom in a lake in America and warning people to keep out of harm's way. For 50 years now, NASA's been launching the satellites that have given us this essential eye on Earth. And the latest, known as Landsat 9, is due to take off shortly. It'll go into orbit to continue the job of tracking changes happening on the land and in the oceans. And this matters more than ever right now, in this year of vital negotiations on climate change, because we have a reminder that we understand so much more about the planet thanks to a fleet of spacecraft flying high above us. David Shukman, BBC News.
Well, a little bit closer to Earth, let's take a look at the weather with Chris Fawkes. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Fiona. I could use some of those satellites, actually. And the forecast, we've seen a big change in our weather patterns. We've seen a cold front move through with a mixture of sunshine and showers following across the UK from the satellite, from in space. You can see this cloud pushing northwards and eastwards. That's our cold front disappearing off, and it's brought a real change in our weather patterns. So Kinloss is in northern Scotland. Yesterday, one of the warmest places in the country at 23 degrees Celsius. Today, it's been about 11 degrees Celsius cooler. The biggest drops in those temperatures have been generally across northern areas of the country. Overnight tonight, we're going to continue to see showers feed in across Wales and parts of Northern Ireland into the southwest as well. So it is generally these western areas of the UK that will continue to see the showers feeding in. Clear spells elsewhere and things cooling off, temperatures getting down into single figures. So much cooler kind of night than we've been used to. Tomorrow it stays quite unsettled. Sunshine and showers again for West Scotland and Northern Ireland, but further southwards, Wales and Western England will see more general rain moving in, and that will spread eastwards and northwards through the day. Some of the rain's quite heavy and will be accompanied by some fairly gusty winds. These temperatures cooler than of late, of course, but actually closer to where they should be at this time of late September. Tuesday night, that rain clears out of the way and we start to get a ridge building in for Wednesday. Wednesday should be a brighter day with more sunshine to go around for most. But again, we'll see a few showers filtering in. Northern areas of Northern Ireland, into the western side of Scotland, North Wales, Cheshire, Merseyside, Greater Manchester, on into the West Midlands. Showers will continue on and off here even into the afternoon. Temperatures 13 to 15 degrees Celsius. And I suppose it's worth pausing for thoughts. September so far has been pretty dry and very, very warm. But the outlook is neither. It stays very unsettled with showers or longer spells of rain, Fiona.
Chris, thanks very much. And that's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we can join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.